Hey guys, good morning. Whew. That last video took a while to get to your eyes and to your feeds, and while I don't necessarily apologize for it, I'm gonna try and edit faster, but it was a long one. And who knows if this one will be too, because we're looking at my favorite shelf, my best shelf in the house. Now, what's the best shelf? I have other shelves of books that are good. There's nothing wrong with those books, but these books did something to me personally, and I will never forgive or forget. Well, I may forget certain parts of them because my mind is only so illustrious, and it's full, usually. So I forget words, and I forget some plot lines and some details, but it doesn't mean that they didn't make an impression on me. It just means I have to revisit them, which I'm also okay with doing. So, before I get started, you know I gotta do it. Please like this video, subscribe if you enjoy the content, or I'm nice to look at. Tell people to come watch this video if they want to see some cool books that maybe they would want to read. And yeah. First up is Mona Awad's Bunny. Now, Mona Awad has a good couple places on this shelf. Have not read 13 Ways of Looking at a Fat Girl, but it's on my list. I need to read it. Anyways, Bunny is about a girl, Samantha. Oh, I need to look at the back. I would remember the character's name. Haven't read this in like 2 years, I think. A girl named Samantha who is in her university's creative writing program, and she gets, I think, paired with this group of girls who call each other Bunny, and they kind of think and act as one. And when she goes over to do a writing exercise with them, I'm pretty sure, they can create boys and create things, creatures, golems, one might say, that they can do with or without at their pleasure. And Samantha kind of gets swept up in that world, even if she's not one of them, per se. And I need to reread this book because I didn't fully appreciate it the first time I read it, because I was just like, what the hell is going on? I don't get it. It was my first introduction to Mona Awad, and with more exposure to her through the other books that I'm going to go into, I think I would really, really like this a lot more on a second read. But it was still eerie and crazy enough for it to get on the shelf without me fully understanding it, so that should say something. Next up, All's Well by Mona Awad. It is about a theater professor, the theater, who has chronic pain due to an accident from a previous performance in All's Well That Ends Well, the Shakespeare play, and she is about to lose her job, and she wants to put on All's Well That Ends Well, and her students say, fuck you, I want to do Macbeth, and she doesn't take that very well. But she gets visited by 3 fairies who kind of remind me of like 3 mobsters almost, and she gets her groove back, as the saying goes, and that's a good thing or a bad thing. Hey, I support a woman's wrongs and her rights, and she has the right to be wrong. This one, I read this at lock speed. I don't know if that's the term, but lock speed is the speed that I read it. It pulled me in so well, and I said this in a previous video, I love a unreliable, unlikable, a flawed character, main character, preferably in this sense, because they're just so much more interesting than the Mary Sue of it all, the one who has like the one flaw of like, oh, like, I'm clumsy, or I'm too good at everything, guys, I can't, like, I'm sorry, you know, that type of stuff. I want someone who is a real person and who makes mistakes, and whether they right them or wrong them, as long as I'm along for the ride, I don't really care, which will play into some of my later choices. Next, of course, is Rouge by Mona Awad. Called a Snow White meets Eyes Wide Shut, which I don't think is a terrible way to put it, but that wouldn't be my first instinct. It is about a woman in Montreal who's a dressmaker, and her mother in California passes away, and she goes over there to settle the affairs, do the funeral, all that. Now, this woman, Belle, has a lot of self-esteem issues, really goes into the skincare because she just thinks that she's ugly, and her mother has always been this, like, perfect porcelain beauty, especially since the main character, Belle, is... And she goes to California and is met with this skincare cult, this beauty cult, and gets lured in. Really, really intriguing, and you kind of fall into the abyss with Belle and how she's getting lured in by this cult to the point where everything seems kind of dreamy and foggy to you, the reader, which I think is great. This broke me out of a reading slump because for a long period of time I wasn't picking up books because I was reading for school, and that kind of took up all the space in my brain, and that really brought me out of a slump. So I highly recommend all of Mona Awad's books. Next up, My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. I haven't reread this book in a long time. I read this during COVID when my source of therapy and just getting through life was to buy books. Did I read all of those books? No. I donated a lot of them, and some of them are still on my shelf and I haven't read them. But this is one of the books that I bought during the pandemic and actually did read. I think this was another book that was big on like the book talk, the bookstagram. I tried to be a bookstagrammer. It didn't stick. And I deleted TikTok, so there you go. But this is about a girl. Let's be reminded of her name, Vanessa. Would you look at that? Would you look at that? It was right there. It is dual timelines. One from when she was a teenager and getting seduced by this older man, her professor, and later in life, 17 years later, when that professor is getting prosecuted, or is about to be prosecuted for, touching kids. Not a thing you should do. And I don't remember a lot of this book because I read it like 4 or 5 years ago, but it did stick with me because it made me, look back on things that happened. It would make you look back on things that happened when you were younger, when you thought you were grown and like, oh, I'm so mature, I'm an old soul. And then you look back and you're like, oh, I was a child and I shouldn't have been doing these things, and the people involved shouldn't have been doing those things with me, have been making me do these things. All that. Really a heavy hitter. Trigger warning, trigger warning, trigger warning. Might be a bit triggering. Next up, a book that I haven't read. It's House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. You're like, Katie, how can a book that you've never read be on your favorite shelf, your important shelf, that these books made you who you are? Well, this book made me just like hate myself because I can't get through it. I keep getting to like 15-ish pages in, and then I'll put it down because you take a break while reading, and I don't pick it up for months, and I have to restart, and I keep doing that. But I am determined to get through this book. It's frame narrative on top of frame narrative on top of frame narrative, to the point where you think, hey, this Mark Z. Danielewski, is he real? Are you sure that he's real? Hold on. See, like Mark Z. Danielewski's House of Leaves by Zampano with introduction and notes by Johnny Truant. I know Zampano and Johnny Truant aren't real. Who's to say Mark Z. Danielewski is real? To be fair. My friend Daniela said she also has this book and has not read it, and we're determined to do like a book club with each other so that we can get through it. Hasn't happened yet, no, because we're scared, and I think we have the right to be scared. Next up is Paperbacks from Hell, Grady Hendrix, with either an endnote or foreword by Will Erickson. Anyways, this is just it's a nonfiction book going through all of these crazy novels, horror novels during the 70s and 80s, and it's divided into kind of their shtick. So you got like chapter 1's Hail Satan, then Creepy Kids, When Animals Attack, Real Estate Nightmares, etc., etc. And this was really formative to me when I was starting to write academic papers about horror. Have I written that many? No, they were all for class, and I really shoehorned them in to make them about horror because I wanted to practice the form of writing like that. And it's also just a super enjoyable book. It would be a very good coffee table book because it has these beautiful pictures of all the covers, and I love some good art. I'll put a B-roll of that, hopefully. And yeah, I read this cover to cover and would read it again. It also informed my choices for like what to read for an academic paper, where to go to look for novels from this era. Really highly recommend to anybody who is getting into horror, who already loves horror, and wants a bit more information on those crazy decades of the 70s and 80s. Similarly, another non-fiction coffee table-esque book, horror movie Monsters by the one and only John Landis. I haven't finished this book because, well, you know, it's fucking gigantic, and I'm flipping through. I've gotten through the vampire and werewolf section. I got this on Chris and I's trip to Vermont. It was our first trip to the States together, and the Barnes & Noble blew my mind. There's such a huge horror section, and also, you know, a lot cheaper than the Canadian prices. This was in the bargain area, the sale area, and also kind of like all the coffee table books. They're big picture books. And this again has the beautiful insides like that. And once again, it's just kind of something that I wanted to give me a bit more information, a bit more. I say that I'm a horror fan. I feel like this will, knowing the information in this book, will cement that and make me not an imposter. How can you be an imposter if you're just a fan of something? I don't know, but that's how I feel. And Speaking on the Grady Hendrix book that I was just talking about before, The Auctioneer by Joan Samson. This is, I love this book. I discovered it from the Grady Hendrix book, and then I was writing an honors thesis for my undergrad on horror and the canon, and my professor was like, oh, you should talk about Stephen King and Shirley Jackson. And while I love those two, as we'll get into, I was like, I'm not going to do that. Everybody talks about Stephen King and Shirley Jackson. And then what do? I talk about Stephen King and Shirley Jackson, but I bring in Joan Samson as like representation. So this book is about a family in a town where the smooth-talking auctioneer moves in, and he starts off like really normal, like, hey, do you have anything in the barn that you'd sell to me for the auction? I'm bringing up money for the town. But then he keeps getting more and more from these families, like, hey, you don't need your truck, you don't need your guns, you don't need this furniture. And he keeps going until the families have nothing. And it's a fantastic book. I'm so happy I have this, I'm pretty sure, original copy from the 70s, based on the price in the corner of $1.95. $1.95, I'm pretty sure it is, and it also has the sprayed edges. I found this at school. We have a shelf of where people can get rid of books that they don't want, and somebody got rid of this, and I was like, hey, your loss is my motherfucking gain, because I wrote my essay on this with a shitty copy that I found online that was not formatted very well, and so I'm so happy to have this. It's beautiful, and I love it. Sinister is a one-word description of this book. Next one that I won't have a lot to say because I haven't read it yet is Hot Blood, Tales of Provocative Horror. I got this because there's a used bookshop in Montreal, Phoenix Books. Anybody who knows, knows. And they posted this on their Instagram as one of like the new books that they had gotten in, and I couldn't let anybody else have it. I needed this book. I love provocative horror. You guys heard me get horny over Nosferatu. I love it. And I just haven't had the chance to read this yet because we never do. We never have a chance to read anything that we actually want to read. But it's on the shelf because I know that it's going to be really, really cool. Next is one near and dear to my heart. Will I remember the character names? No, but that's not my fault. The Gargoyle by Andrew Davidson. This special copy was given to me by one of my best friends, Cassandra, I think it was for my birthday or Christmas one year. It's this lovely copy with the sprayed edges again. Got it used, obviously. And it's about this guy who honestly sucks, and he gets into a car crash. He gets burns all over his body, and he's healing in the hospital, and he meets kind of like this manic pixie dream girl almost, who carves gargoyles. And she believes that she is from centuries ago, where I think she was like a nun, and she's met him in that lifetime, and she's been waiting to find him again. If that's not what the story's about, don't come for me. Another book that I want to reread. It is, usually I don't go for a historical novel. This one pulled me in like no tomorrow. Again, a main character who you don't like, and eventually you do like. You like him because he was unlikable and he got better. I don't think Andrew Davidson, correct me if I'm wrong, has written anything else. When I first finished this, I looked him up because I was like, I gotta get on this guy's shit. And I couldn't really find anything. I think he wrote some like non-fiction books. But fucking yeah, it says here, oh, Manitoba, Canada. Another Canadian. Gargoyle is his first book. And that's all I got. That's all the information I have on this man. Does he even exist? Who's to say? Really good. I always find copies of this in my second hometown's used bookstore. Like, I found 3 copies at different instances. I don't know how people keep reading this in that area and donating it when before I received it from my friend, I've never heard of it in my life. It's very strange. American Psycho by Bret, Easton, Ellis. This book needs no introduction. It's one of my favorite movies, and I'd seen the movie first, of course. And I was like, how is the book gonna compare to this? And the book does get more gory. There's one section with an eyeball, for those who know, they know, that I had to like pause, put the book down for a second, because it made me queasy. But I'm surprised that I loved his style, because it does go into the, like the copious amounts of description of like what they're wearing, the brands, and then the in-depth analysis of the albums that Bateman is looking into, is interested in. But it works. It fucking kills. And by the end, you're kind of lost as well, right along with him. There's one scene where he's either drugged out or just crazed, and he's sweating, and he's running all over the city, doing random things, like buying things and scaring the assistant, the shopkeep, whatever. And you're just lost with him. I really liked it. I really love the movie too. I would like to read more of Bret Easton Ellis's books, because I think all of them kind of have that style. You would assume so if he's writing it. People usually remain consistent. Next up, Donna Tartt's The Secret History. I almost said The Goldfinch. Never even read The Goldfinch. Secret History. I think this is a fan favorite for a lot of people, especially those into dark academia. It's a guy who gets into a competitive classics, like Latin class, where he doesn't really fit in at first, I don't believe, and then he kind of gets swept up in their craziness, and they're all upper class and kind of privileged. And another book that I bought and read during the pandemic, and it stuck with me. Need to reread it, because obviously, as you can tell, I don't have the specifics to tell you, but this isn't what this video is about. I'm not here giving you in-depth reviews and analysis of these books. I'm just saying these books formed who I am as a person, and you can blame them for how I am today. Next up, Tender is the Flesh by Agustina Bazterrica. This swept social media. It made waves. My friend Daniela has a very in-depth review of it, or at least talks about another person's in-depth review of it, of how much they hate it, and she goes off on it all the time, and it delights me to no end. But if you don't know, it's a world where you can't eat animals anymore because they will kill you. Like, there's some pathogen in them that will make humans sick. So they just start eating humans, and it becomes really normal. There's finger foods, literally, and commentary on, to some extent, like, veganism and shit, but also ownership, consent gets really important later down the line, and just making you think about what we do to animals and putting humans in its place so you can realize kind of how fucked up it is to some extent. Really good. I also got her short stories, and I thought they were, like, eh. There were some that were really good and some that were really, really horrible, awful. That could be a translation problem. That's always something up in the air when it's a translated work. But, yeah. This one fucks. The Troop by Nick Cutter, aka Craig Davidson. I almost chose this book as one of the topics for my master's thesis. Who knows, maybe I still will, because I haven't figured that shit out yet. Scared Stephen King to shit, and I understand why. It grossed me the fuck out. It is about a troop of Boy Scouts who go on a secluded little island, because they're going to do, camping trip, and this guy, infected, comes to the island and spreads this infection to the rest of them, and it just makes them hunger so much where they're eating anything, and it's eating the inside of them. It's disgusting. There are sections where it's kind of like lab documents, lab entries about the worm, I'm going to call it, the pathogen, the disease itself affecting, I think one instance is a hamster, the other is a monkey, a chimp, and those sections I had to, like, close it for a second. There's, like, the worm itself coming out of the monkey's asshole, and the monkey biting at it to rip it out, and it's just that section kind of reminds me of, like, Chuck Palahniuk's Guts. If you're familiar, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Super good. I want to read The Deep by him. I want to see if it gets as gross as this one. I hope so. Next up, Otessa Moshfegh's My Year of Rest and Relaxation. Another big social media hitter. About a young woman who's just, like, not happy with life and, like, where she's at, so she decides that she's going to take a year on sleeping pills and just sleep through a year, and that hopefully by the end of it, she can figure out her life. She just needs some sleep and relaxation. Again, another book that I want to reread because I don't remember all of the events in it, especially because set in the 2000s, the year 2000 New York, it ends with 9/11, and somehow I completely forgot that it ended with 9/11, so clearly I need to reread it. But I love Moshfegh's writing style and her characters. I just read Eileen and Gumshugum, insert the name here. Just so good. Labvona is so good as well. And this one, it's a plotless novel, and apparently I really like those. I thought that I wouldn't, but I love a good character study. It just on this one person, and you get to see all of their flaws and maybe some of their good parts. It's usually the flaws, though. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Kesey, Ken, KK, as those in the know call him. About a man who enters a psych ward who doesn't think he's crazy. He was just avoiding, I think, jail time, and he's trying to make it better for everybody around him as well as himself, and trying to break Nurse Ratched, and it just ends on a really sad note. There's the great movie with Jack Nicholson, one of my faves. I'm sorry, I'm taking all of these books out and there's dust on my nose. I was reading this, I didn't read it for school or anything, I just really wanted to read it before I watched the movie. And my friends were like, oh, what class are you reading that for? I'm like, oh, none. It's just for funsies. And they're like, why are you reading that? I was like, why wouldn't I? It's a really good book. They're like, yeah, but it's like a classic. That's like homework. And I didn't understand my friends that day, because it's really, really good, and I recommend it to anybody. It pairs nicely with, say, like, Girl Interrupted, or, if I remember correctly, The Bell Jar. I feel like those would be really cool things to read together. Since I mentioned it, The Bell Jar, Sylvia Plath. Ignoring the problems with the author. This is a really important book to me when I read it. As a girl who was and still considers herself lost, not in New York, and not to the point of hospitalization, not incarceration. It just hits for the girls who girl and aren't all right in the head. This is required reading, and you have a test on Monday, so you better start reading. Esther was poor, didn't know what she was going to do with her life, gets a scholarship, and starts to live in the town in New York, I think it was, yeah. And then things start to go wrong because, you know, she's not mentally well. And drugs and alcohol aren't going to help you as much as we like to think it will. It doesn't. This is beautiful. I love this book. Again, I want to reread it. That's the problem, though, is that you get into a cycle of wanting to reread books that you've already read, and then you don't read anything new. So then you think, oh, I gotta put these away and, like, tackle my TBR, the things that I want to read. And you read those, and then you forget these ones. So you start rereading these ones, you don't read those ones. Blech. Hey, maybe I should just remember things better, but I guess I don't. I don't know. These two I'm going to do at the same time. Good Morning Midnight and Voyage in the Dark by Jean Rhys. I was introduced to her through my undergraduate degree. Don't you love these covers? Gorgeous. Got the blue, like cerulean teal, whatever. Really, really pretty. Jean Rhys was a Dominican. Yeah, a white Dominican, and that plays a lot into her novels, where the female characters are white, but they're from Dominican, and they have the experiences of both black people and white people, and they're mentally ill, and there's themes of just being lost in life, lost in love, getting abused, getting a lot of themes of marriage, marriage, but motherhood is what I was going to say. Really complicated texts for me. They get very dreamy and lost, circular, one might say. Look at her. There she is. Another academic book, Lolita, Vladimir Nabokov. Now, I first read this for a high school assignment. We had to pick classics from a list that our high school professor provided. We were a team of two, and one person had to, it was a debate, one person had to be pro teaching the book in high school, and one had to be con teaching the book in high school, and I, of course, got pro Lolita teaching it in high school. I almost won that debate, I'm very proud to say. But the second time I read this, and probably the more in-depth version, because I wasn't in high school, was for a class on American fiction, American literature. He's Russian, so I don't know how I got in there, but it's disturbing, it's romantic in a way that makes you uncomfortable. It's another unreliable, unlikable narrator that to some point you get to understand a little bit. And I'm always interested, do not misquote me on this, I'm always interested on stories about, like, pedophilia, and in this case, it's a quasi-incest, because he ends up being her stepdad, because I wrote, like, a whole 40-page paper in CJIP when I was in the psychology program about pedophilia and incest, so I think it was kind of natural that this was going to stick to me. And it's just, like, really well written. Next up, we have Frankenstein and Dracula, the two big ones, the two big monsters. I love them. Here, look. They're kissing. As you can see, I recently wrote a paper on this one, and I really tabbed it the fuck up. See all my notes. I don't need to tell you what these are about. I can tell you, I really like the epistolary, there's a $5 word for you, epistolary format of them, epistolary being written in letters. When I first got into these, I didn't know they were written like that, and I was kind of bamboozled, but I really liked it. I read this one first, and then years and years passed, and then I read this one, much to the shock and chagrin of my peers and friends, because they thought that I would have read this in the womb, you would think, and I didn't, because I'm a poser, and I suck. But it's just gorgeous. I think one side of me wants to say I like Frankenstein better, but that's because I've read it like 3 times. Dracula, I've only read once, but I think my heart says I like Dracula more. I'm not sure. I don't love these editions, though. If you see, they're the ones that Chapters, now Indigo, does. And I found out that they actually cut some material from these in order... They call it like, oh, you still get your meat and potatoes, but we just cut the fat. Huh? Excuse me? Why are you cutting the classics? So now I'm worried that I read these and there's material cut. So I would like to get different copies and read those to see if that's true. Another of one of those terrible copies. A book that I will reread probably once a year. We Have Always Lived in the Castle. I love this book. I love young women who are weird and who say fuck you to the man. Any man. Also love strange old men, which are a different subclass. They're not just a regular man. If they're a strange old man, they can do no wrong. This is about Mary Cat and Constance Blackwood, some of the last remaining Blackwoods, along with their Uncle Julian. Uncle Julian. And it's believed that the older sister Constance poisoned and killed the rest of their family, and now a cousin Charles is coming along to try and steal their money. And I think it is a gorgeous book. It's very short. It's only, this copy at least, is just under 200 pages. And I wrote an essay on this. It didn't have anything to do with the class. I reread it in one night. And I was like, yeah, I can write an essay on this because I really want to, and I can make it fit. And to some extent, I did. I didn't fully bullshit the professor. Like, didn't fully convince him, but I got a good grade. Beautiful. We'll continue to reread it. Shirley Jackson's final novel. And it also says her best. I can't say to that. I have the rest of her novels over there. Have I read them yet? No. Fake. Fake fan. Shirley Jackson. Haunting of Hill House. Fun fact, during that essay, the first draft, I accidentally called her Shirley the entire time. You're supposed to refer to them by their last name, so Jackson. And I was on a first name basis with Shirley, apparently. Haunting of Hill House. Eleanor. I feel like there's a lot of Eleanors. Eleanor is a woman who doesn't really have a life outside of, like, taking care of her mother. And she goes on this, I don't remember how she gets there. She gets an ad or something. She's, like, kind of paranormal-esque. She's had encounters with them. And she gets to go to this house, Hill House, with a group of people who are kind of doing a study on it, occultists. And she just falls right into the shenanigans of that house and stays with it, if you read the ending. I think I watched the original movie first before I read this. It was like in the 60s, I think it came out. And then I read this. It's really good. I haven't watched the TV series yet. I would like to. I know it's an offshoot of this. It's not exactly like this. But I think Shirley Jackson's just really good at getting that haunting feeling where you're not scared. Like, it's not like a jump scare, but it stays with you and it lingers and it draws a finger down your neck kind of feeling. And I had to get the Penguin editions for her other novels. They're all Penguin editions because they're so beautiful. Like, look at the difference between these. This is like the equivalent of those romance novels where it's a cartoon outline, and this is art. I don't know, man. I just don't know. Now, if you know me personally, you're probably thinking, Katie, where's the Stephen King? Everybody who knows me knows that I love Stephen King. I haven't read all of his books, but I have a lot of them, and I love him. He's a great inspiration to me, as to any young white girl, I would say, who's in the horror community. If I were to pick some of his fiction to be here, it would definitely be Misery, The Shining, probably of the short story collections Night Shift, and Pet Sematary. I don't own Pet Sematary though. And maybe Carrie. I don't own Carrie. Maybe a separate video I'll show you my copies of the Stephen King novels. But what is on the shelf? Stephen King's On Writing and Danse Macabre. This is a recent acquisition, again, from my good friend Cassandra. She bought this book used to read one chapter and then said it was always meant for you. I was just borrowing it for a time. As you can see, I just started reading it the other day. Now, this book, On Writing, I've combed through many a time. I didn't take any notes on it because I wasn't in my note-taking phase of life, but it's a great kind of, I don't think you can say autobiography because it's not like that in-depth, but a good telling of his early years, the struggles that he went through, which I love a memoir, love an autobiography. So that, and then a little bit on how to get better at writing, whatever that means, because you can get better at writing. Will your writing be good? Don't know. It's subjective. And I constantly go back to this book because it really means a lot to me. I asked for it for Christmas one year, and here it is. Amazing. And Danse Macabre, I've always wanted to read it, and I could never find a secondhand copy of it because for a period of time, COVID, I was buying new versions of his books, and I was like, well, you can always find a Stephen King book in the secondhand bookstore, so I can just slowly collect them, and they'll be like the cooler vintage copies, which I always like. And then my friend gave me this one, and it's gorgeous. I love how it's kind of stained red on the edges here, and I'm not sure if that's on purpose. It kind of just looks a little mangled and gross. Like there's even red on the side here, which is definitely not on purpose. And I really like that. It gives it character. Oh, my bookmark. Now this next set I wasn't going to show you because they're for my thesis and I am self-conscious about it, but I will because they're on the shelf and commitment. So there's two non-fiction kind of theoretical texts that I have here. Julia Kristeva's Powers of Horror and Barbara Creed's The Monstrous-Feminine. This, it's about Julia Kristeva's theory of abjection. I've taken a lot of notes on it, and we'll see. We'll see if I get to talk about this in my thesis if I don't drop out first. So yeah, if you don't hear, I also asked for this book for Christmas because I had a digital copy, and I hate it because I can't take notes properly, and my parents' dog chewed on it a little bit, so now I have a little bit of Neva with me along the way, and isn't that the most terrifying thing? Then we have Monstrous-Feminine. This is a film theory book, and you might be thinking, Katie, as far as I can remember, you're in the literature program. And yes, I am, but, you know, shit happens. I've taken lots of notes and highlights on it, and I want to read her new one. There's a new volume. Yeah, there's also a lot of, like, French theory in it, which I'm not very good at it. but it's a challenge, and I like a challenge. And now the 3 books that I think I'm gonna do my thesis on, but I'm kind of on the fence, because when am I not? We have Wilder Girls by Rory Powers, Colorine by Jade Song, and Geek Love by Catherine Dunn. Wilder Girls is it's probably YA, on the edge of YA, of a group of girls at a boarding school who have been quarantined because they're infected with this parasite that's making their bodies go through changes. Jade Song's Chlorine is about a female swimmer, an athlete, teenager, who decides to take matters into her own hands and become the mermaid that she's supposed to be. And Catherine Dunn's Geek Love is about a circus family, the Banewskis, who the parents purposefully took drugs and things to genetically alter their children so that they have flippers, or that they are Siamese twins, albino, hunchback, etc., etc. And all pretty good. Wilder Girls I appreciate more on a second read. The ending still makes me a little mad, though. Same with Catherine Dunn's Geek Love. People need to know how to figure out an ending. But they're all about young women becoming monstrous, and there being physical transformations, and that's something that I wanted to look at. If you guys have recommendations for other novels or stories or movies about young girls transforming into monsters, please recommend, because I'm not tied to these ones, especially this one because it's on the edge of YA and I don't really want to cover that. But yeah, look guys, my shelf's empty except for like my library books, but you don't have to worry about that. Editor Katie here in my office, my bed. Here are some honorable mentions for the favorite shelf. Either they're not on the shelf because I don't own them, because I don't have the space, or, you know, life happens, mistakes are made. And if there are any really important novels to me that I've left out from this list, I sincerely apologize. Okay? Go back to your video. I got work to do, seriously. Get the fuck out. I hope you enjoyed. If you look over here, the pile of books I have on the floor, no free feet pics, pile of books I have on the floor. Now I get to dust. Isn't that exciting? That's the shelf. Maybe in the future I'll take you on a different journey of the books that are on the regular shelf. No less love. They're just over there and they don't get the prime spot next to the desk and in front of the bed. You know, that's how it goes. Bye guys. Enjoy. Hope you liked it. Let me know what you want to see next.